Hello and welcome to the Play Review with me, Douglas Schatz.
And me, Jodi Rylett.
Hello, Jodi.
Hello, good to see you.
Nice to see you again. Okay, our show today is The Hills of California by Jez Butterworth, which is currently playing at the Harold Pinter Theatre in London. A new play by Jez Butterworth, directed by Sam Mendes, is a theatrical event. Butterworth's last stage play being The Ferryman back in 2017, also directed by Sam Mendes, though in between times we've had a revival of his iconic play Jerusalem in the West End, in which Mark Rylance reprised his incomparable performance as the exuberant anti-hero Rooster Byron. As in The Ferryman, The Hills of California is a multi-generational family drama that features a large ensemble cast, headed by Laura Donnelly, Butterworth's real-life partner. Do not be misled by the play's title, however. It is not set in sunny California, but in a rundown guest house in the back streets of Blackpool. Although, as we will discover, The Hills of California, as described in Johnny Mercer's song of the same name, stand in for a faraway dream for the family in Blackpool. The play opens in the summer of 1976, which anyone over a certain age in Britain will remember for its record heat and sunshine. You're nodding there, Jodi.
I was but a child.
I was going to say, you're not old enough.
I've seen photos of me in tiny shorts and a t-shirt. We visited London that year, which was unheard of in the blistering heat, and my dad was furious. He had to spend 80p on a can of Coke.
When I came to Britain in the 1980s, people used to talk all the time about the summer of 76. The proprietress of the Seaview Guest House, Veronica, lies dying upstairs, and her 3, possibly 4 daughters are coming together to say goodbye to her. I say possibly because one of the daughters seemingly escaped to California and is rumored to be returning for the first time in many years, though some are skeptical that she will appear. The play alternates between the daughters' reunion and scenes from their childhood back in 1955, when Veronica had dreams of molding her 4 girls into a famous singing troupe in the model of the Andrews Sisters. She drills them in song and dance routines, determined that one day they will perform at the London Palladium or even Carnegie Hall. Needless to say, things don't turn out as they'd all hoped for. The play is a portrait of lost dreams, of deeply ingrained patterns of love and hurt within a family, and of suppressed memories and how hard it may be to forgive. A new Jez Butterworth play comes with great expectations, as I've said. So, Jodi, were you full of expectation, and did The Hills of California live up to them for you?
I was definitely full of expectation, and it thoroughly lived up to it for me. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I would see it again in a heartbeat. I always love an ensemble piece anyway. I loved the interplay between all of the women, the younger sisters. They're a year apart. So poor Veronica had a really rough time of it, raising them on her own. I just felt like they got so quickly into us believing in this family and their relationships with one another. I was invested in them from the outset. I was invested in them the second I met them in 1976. And then it was delightful to get to know them as younger girls, as teenagers, and to meet their amazing mum, Veronica. I mean, Laura Donnelly, what a performance as the mum. Just outstanding.
Yeah, we'll talk about her, but you're right. Hugely impressed at Butterworth's ability to center the play on these wonderful female characters. It's so good, isn't it, on the dynamic between the siblings, the long-established patterns, frustrations, grievances, as well as the bonds of love that come from a uniquely shared past. And as you say, the performances are excellent, including the young actors who play the teenage girls. And the set rotates, so you move from 1976 back to 1955 and then back again, which is very effective. There was a few caveats I had, and certainly some of the critics, which surprised me a little bit. But one was that they thought it was unnecessarily long, that perhaps the writing was somewhat self-indulgent at times, so it became a bit drawn out and the pace or the interest slackened. Did you feel that at all?
No, I did not. I did not, and I'm not a fan of a long play. I'm never happier than when it's an hour and 15 straight through without an interval.
We should say this is 3 hours plus, right?
It flew by. So I did not feel that. I didn't feel like I was squirming in my seats, and I didn't perceive it from my fellow audience members.
No, I agree. It was long, but it never bothered me. I never lost interest. And as you say, the people I sat next to, we were chatting during interval and things, and they loved it. I did feel generally, I think, that the scenes with the men are simply less potent than those with the women, and that dilutes the intensity of the central dynamic between the daughters. And in fact, I'd be hard pressed to remember the husbands' names and who was married to whom, I'm afraid. So I have a feeling that they didn't make as much impact. I would say also that the minor subplot of the nurse and the debate about euthanasia was probably not required, even.
Hmm. Agreed on all of the above. The euthanasia bit, I didn't feel it was especially laboured.
No, but I also didn't feel particularly invested or moved by the dilemma. Some critics also thought that the Faustian deal that Veronica is presented with was not particularly original, and we're not going to give detail away what that is, though I found her wrestling with that horribly compelling. It culminates in just the most terrible moment when she's alone on stage listening to Joan, her daughter, sing upstairs, and then the singing stops. The tension and torment on her face were just agonizing to watch.
Yeah.
And without giving it away, again, other critics objected to the need for the very dramatic plot revelation in Joan's story late on in the play. But, again, regardless of how credible it may have felt, the thematic resonance was certainly worth it for me because it's a generational connection that's being made there.
Agreed. I mean, I think it's harsh to say, the dilemma that Veronica was faced with was not particularly original because these things are the stuff of life, and it is something that still happens. It's something that is still present. It is.
Well, it's very real in a Me Too generation, of course, right? Because we have a character, this American producer who visits, and the girls audition for him. And he was convincingly menacing, I thought, played by Corey Johnson.
He had such a quiet, menacing power. It was awful. He barely cracked a smile, and how he could not melt with Veronica's wonderful charm like everybody usually does.
Oh, no, he was impervious to that.
He knew what he was there for. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was real threat and tension in that scene.
Yeah.
So mainly I've been expressing caveats of other critics, but I found that there are also moments of sheer theatrical alchemy that somehow Butterworth conjures every time. The song numbers, for example.
Yeah.
We should stress this is about music too. There is music all the way through this play, which is a delight. And the song numbers are mesmerizing, aren't they? I mentioned the audition number, which is just full of joyous, naive kind of energy, the young girls performing.
Yeah.
But also there are other moments which are just spellbinding, where at the end of Act 1, Veronica leads the girls in the hills of California, and she's just trying to sustain the dream, and it's just beautifully composed.
It is beautifully composed. She gathers them at her feet in the chair, and the girls have their back to us, the audience, and we are somehow drawn in like we're sat at her feet as well. And we're so invested in it, and these beautiful voices. You just want things to work out for this wonderful family.
Yes. And then the final coming together at the very end of the play, the grown-ups slip back into a remembered rendition of A Little Dream, I think it is, which is really poignant because it somehow acknowledges the bonds they share as well as the failed dreams. And then it's all literally brought together because the young girls also join them.
Oh, that was a nice touch. That was so beautiful. That sort of Little Women type moment around the table,
Yeah. I mean, we may be a bit sentimental, but boy, it was pretty moving, I think, and beautifully structured and staged. Oh, you mentioned Laura Donnelly in the lead role of Veronica. She is fantastic, isn't she?
Yeah. Yeah. What a role to get your teeth into as well. She is this phenomenally powerful woman. She's had these children. At the stage we meet them, they're 12, 13, 14, and 15. Bang, 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 a year apart. But her husband has Variously, depending on what story she tells.
Yeah.
Died in El Alamein, in a German U-boat, in Jerez in Spain, in a fight. She's been on her own is the main thing, and she's making a living somehow, eking out within this boarding house on the edges of Blackpool. It's not even in right the heart of Blackpool, sort of in the less salubrious part of town. And she's just this phenomenal woman, training the girls in this singing and giving them hope and encouraging them and drilling them and running an amazingly tight ship at home. And my goodness, the lodgers, they would not cross her. One of my favourite moments is when one of the male lodgers starts to walk through their kitchen. And she stands in front of him and says, how many times have I told you this is our private parlour? You'll walk around the front like everybody else who lodges here. And he said, well, it takes me another 10 minutes and I've just done a 12-hour shift. And she couldn't care if it takes you another 12 days. If you stay here, you'll stand by my rules. And she just looks at him and he turns around and he goes, and then a whole scene plays out and we've forgotten all about him. And then we hear him come in and he goes wearily up the stairs and the audience just erupted.
He's done his 10-minute circuit around the block. She is formidable, isn't she? And she keeps it all together, but she's completely buttoned up, isn't she? The way she carries herself, the way she's carefully dressed, erect posture. It's just a sort of an effortful self-control, however, because beneath this fiery determination, you can also see the brittleness of her hopes and the challenges that she's got as you say, a single mother, and how high the stakes for her are. And that audition scene, it's a wonderful set piece by the young girls performing. But I tell you what, I spent most of my time looking at Laura Donnelly's reaction as they went through the routine, because she is so invested in every move and it is so important to her. She was amazing. And then, I'm afraid we have to give away a slight spoiler here, Donnelly actually reappears in Act 3 playing her grown-up daughter, Joan. And this is an extraordinary transformation, such that if I didn't tell you, you may not even recognize her.
Yeah.
And in fact, the program deliberately does not give this away in the cast list. She embodies a completely different physical and vocal being. She's got that relaxed physicality that sort of oozes laid-back California where Joan has been living. And Joan has lived the life of a rock and roll groupie of sorts.
She's so cool.
Yeah, but a contrived sort of cool, but also a deeper real-world weariness. We see that she carries hurt under this shell of cultivated indifference. She is just worth the price of admission.
Yeah, she really, really is. It was an incredible transformation, her physicality, all of it. And the costume as well, that long Afghan coat, In fact, all of the costumes were great. I loved the 1970s outfit, the men in their short-sleeved shirts and their flares and their long hair. I loved all of this attention to detail.
Yeah, the contrast you see between Veronica in the 1950s with her buttoned-up twin suit or whatever you call it, and the California chick of the 1970s was fantastic. What about some of the other performers as the other daughters? Leanne Best is Gloria.
Yeah, great. Fiery, shouty. Her delivery, she's like a rat-tat-tat-tat-tat machine gun, and no one messes with her hard as nails. And when her character first appears, she's just arrived after a very hot journey in a non-air conditioned car in sub-Saharan temperatures, and she's yelling at her kids who are fighting, and she's biting, she violently attacks them, she's whacking them and yelling at them. This is like 1970s parenting at its peak. Some of her lines, one of them, I wish I could remember them all, but one of them was, she's a woman who gets good use out of a chair. just priceless. I wanted to keep pausing her or to slow it down so I could rewind it so I could hear it again. And this is familiar to me, these sort of patterns of family talk.
Yeah, well, she's an angry one, but this anger and some jealousy hide or express even her disappointment and pain that she carries as well, because, we discover later that she's been damaged by the past. And that has led to her loss of faith in her mother and the world.
Yeah. And I thought Leanne Best played that beautifully.
She did. Ophelia Lovibond as Ruby. I thought she was great in the first 2 acts. She was sassy and smart. But there was a bit of a weird transformation went on in Act 3 with her, where she became strangely obsequious to Joan when she returns from California. And I didn't think that tallied with the character that we'd seen in the first half of the play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I I don't suppose I saw that as an inconsistency, although you're right, it was very marked. I think it's that thing when she was 13 at the point that we meet her at the beginning. And it won't have been very long after that that Joan went off to America to pursue her other life. And I think she's lived all this time with these stories about glamorous Joan in the US. And that is a big theme of the play, isn't it? The stories that we tell, the glamour of it, the excitement of it. And you can see in the way that Ruby dresses, she's the one who takes the most care of her dress. She's the one who cares most about fashion. And in walks Joan looking like the epitome of cool. And so I think maybe it was overdone, agreed, but it didn't feel inconsistent, I guess.
So it's felt like she reverted to her teenage self.
Looking right up to her sister.
But it seemed very sudden and too much to me, because she had demonstrated to us that she was quite a fiery and strong-minded, independent kind of woman up to that point. Helena Wilson, who plays Jill, I think, she does the long-suffering spinster who stays at home to care for mum thing.
Yeah, she did that exceptionally well. Her look, her demeanor, the pallor of her skin, the way she held herself. And then there are these lovely little moments, like when they're reminiscing about a time when mum had paid to have an advert at the local cinema about their guest house. And she had to sing a little song with a little dance routine, and she reenacts it. And then Ruby joins in, much to Gloria's fury, because she's trying to have a very angry, serious moment. And they keep singing and dancing over her. It was immaculate.
That was lovely, actually. They both did a great turn there. What about the men? As I said, I found them slightly less memorable. There's Brian Dick, who actually has a double turn. He has a nice turn as Jack Larkin, a local wannabe stand-up comedian, who has some classically terrible but funny jokes.
I'm a fan of a bad dad joke.
Okay.
I thought they were all good gags.
Yeah, there was a lot of laughter around me at the time as well. And he has a soft spot for Veronica, which is kind of endearing.
He does.
But of course, his true provincial stature, so to speak, is certainly shown up when the American producer arrives and puts him in his place. He doubles up as Dennis, Ruby's husband, who keeps going out for walks. One imagines because he's not too keen to spend time with all of his sisters.
I mean, who could blame him?
Exactly. Although it could also be for a costume change.
Could be. Did you notice this genius touch? Did you notice his sunburn? Oh my God, it was so good, because he's been out drinking as well. Clearly fallen asleep on the beach or on a bench or something. And only one side of his face is really, really bright red. And one side, his arm on one side was so red with then a white line where his shirt went up.
Detail.
I love the detail.
Yeah. I mean, talking of not finding the men memorable, though, Ruby even says in the script of her own husband that if he went missing, she wouldn't know how to describe him to the police. So, yeah, she said it for us.
I know that, but we have endured decades and decades and decades of men-led stories where the women are just the girlfriend or wife. So it's just a one of them, it's fine. They'd served their purpose. They weren't there to be vehicles for the story. They were just, sidekicks.
Yes, that's true, which is why I think, just going back to my point, I think there's a slight dip when there's a scene between the two husbands that goes on a little bit, and think, well, we're not really going to get to the bottom of these characters. They are peripheral in the way that you've described. So I think that was just wasted time,
Yes,
really.
Yeah, that might have been a sop to making sure that the that the actors had something to get their teeth into,
To do something, yeah.
Yeah.
Sean Dooley as Bill, the other husband married to Gloria, who's a bit socially dysfunctional and laps into these terrible voices. And Gloria is horrible to him.
She is so horrible to him.
But I can see why. I mean,
What did we say? What did we say, Bill, about your voices? She's so funny with him. But, he was that sweet, hapless, long-suffering kind of, I imagine as a young man that he got Gloria must have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
His entire life, he's felt like he's won the lottery because she's so beautiful and so fierce, and I just think he's in her thrall completely. He's a sweet man.
And there's no doubt he's playing the good cop with their children, who she's all over all the time.
I would imagine, yeah.
Anyway, anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about the show?
I would. The setting, just briefly, this could be another reason why I loved it so much, right? Because Blackpool, it has such an iconic history. So in the Northeast, so my grandparents every year, every single year, at least twice a year, went to Blackpool. And what would happen was the pits, the collieries would all close for the same week, or the factories, they call it factory fortnight.
Yep.
And everybody would go back in the day. They'd go en masse to Blackpool and they'd stay in these boarding houses. And I remember in the 70s, Grandma and Grandad took me to Blackpool to a boarding house with my sister, presumably to give Mum and Dad a little bit of a break over the long summer holidays. And these boarding houses, they were run by really scary women. And also the rules were you arrived, you were allowed in at a certain time, and then you could have your tea, and then you had to be back home by a certain time and the door would be locked and you wouldn't get back in again. And throughout the day, once you'd had your breakfast, the doors were locked and you weren't allowed back in until tea time. It was literally like a flop house. You could have your breakfast, and then you came back for your tea, and that was it.
You've been there, seen that, done it.
And it was just so brilliant to see that.
It's another world, isn't it?
It is another word, but I like that whole metaphor, the naming convention for the hotel. It's like a metaphor for aspiration. The Seaview Hotel, then it was the Seaview Guest House, then there's the Seaview Luxury Guest House, then Seaview Luxury Guest House and Spa, and then it went back to the Luxury Guest House and back to this, and back, until by the time we meet them, it's just called Seaview.
Yeah, and of course, the lovely detail in that is that there is no sea view.
There is no sea view. And again, this is a metaphor for aspiration again.
Yeah.
The whole piece around Veronica's stories about how Dad died. And one of the older sisters, I think Gloria, is trying to spell it out to Gillian or whatever. But Dad, who knows how Dad died or if he even is dead.
No, he was a sailor who came and went. And I think he just went.
Well, there you go.
So I know that you don't like to pronounce star ratings for a show, Jodi, but how strongly would you recommend this?
The most strong recommendation I could possibly give.
Okay, so you can read how many stars that means yourselves, listeners. I confess that I'm not entirely sure how he does it, but Butterworth has a special ability to create theatrical magic, and there are moments of spellbinding, dramatic beauty, more than you might get in a whole year of theater going, frankly. So worth seeing for those moments and the wonderful performances by all the women in particular. The Hills of California continues at the Harold Pinter Theater until the 15th of June. Thanks for listening. Nice to see you, Jodi. See you next time.
You too. See you next time. Bye.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please visit theplaypodcast.com to share your comments, or email us at plays@theplaypodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.